Ho, good morning, Sunday, week 10 of the NFL season. We're already to week 10, crazy double digits, and you're here with Football Diehards, the Sunday DFS show with the popular and talented Jason Brady and the old man of fantasy, Emil Kadlec. Jason, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, feeling good, coming off of probably the best week of my life last week, so hopefully keep it rolling here this week. Got a lot of plays we can talk about, talking some ownership, talking some strategy, and hopefully win some money on Sunday.
Woo-hoo. That's fantastic. What a week. I remember we had a lot of interesting talk about various players. I'm glad. Who was your best players last week?
It's got to be Christian McCaffrey. It was like 4% owned in my single entry. It was insane.
Whoa, 4% owned. Yeah, I
I
remember
thought
we
it'd
were
be a lot
talking
higher.
about the fact that he's coming back, and we said roll with it because his price is going to go up. And of course, he gets hurt. Luckily, in the fourth quarter. Ooh, that was kind of mean. I apologize.
No, it was on like the last play, I think.
Oh yeah.
Crazy.
Well, I don't know if it was the last play of the game, but it was his last play. But it was down there because I remember them showing him on the sidelines, poking away at him. All right, you want to start with quarterbacks?
Yep, we'll start with quarterbacks here. Not going to touch on every single play, but just the ones I'm really interested in. Starting up top, and this is probably where I'm going to go to in cash, and a lot of tournament lineups as well. And it's Kyler Murray at 8,000 going against Buffalo. 56.5 point game total here. Cardinals are 2-point favorites. He is averaging 31.4 DraftKings points per game. And I really love the matchup here against Buffalo, who has given up the second most points to opposing quarterbacks. Tons of rushing yard upside for Carla Murray. He had 100 rushing yards last week, 8 rushing touchdowns on the year, 35 rushing attempts in the last 3 games. So the dude runs the ball a lot. That's what you're looking for in a cash game lineup. You're looking for that nice floor, and I think Kyler Murray gives you that high touchdown upside and what's projected to be the highest total on the slate here. I love the stacking options. Kyler Murray's my favorite quarterback play this week.
Wow, yeah, he's been on a roll, and he's at 18.3%. You know, he got 111 rushing yards last week, or 100 something on 11 carries. That's incredible. I mean, he's just so elusive. And John Laub and I were talking about how he doesn't seem to get the hits. He seems to be able to go out of bounds or slide, or it's incredible what he's doing. And we'll talk receivers later, but it's affecting his receivers a little bit. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, he's on fire. And is his salary that bad? 8,000?
The thing about salary this week is there is so much value on the slate that you can pretty much build any lineup you want. Like, we're going to talk about some value plays, so I'm fine with going up there and getting Kyler Murray.
Sounds good.
All right, so the next play here, Josh Allen, 7,500 versus Arizona, 56.5 point game total, where the Bills are going to be 2.5 point underdogs here. And he did have a rough stretch of games. I think it was like a 3 or 4 game rough stretch. And then he bounced back last week versus Seattle, was all over that. He scored 39 DraftKings points and had 4 total touchdowns. Another great matchup here against Arizona. Arizona has given up the 5th most DraftKings points to quarterbacks this year. And Josh Allen, another guy that has some decent rushing yard upside, not the rushing yard upside as like a Kyler Murray, but still some rushing yard upside nonetheless. And he's ran the ball 28 times in the last 3 weeks. And he should have plenty of upside in this game. That's projected to be a very high scoring potential shootout here. So Josh Allen, you get a little bit of savings off of Carla Murray. I like the Josh Allen dig stack. I did it last week. It worked out well. Probably going to go back to it here again in tournaments. But for cash, I'm more leaning towards the Murray side. But so I think Allen's a really good play here.
Yeah, he's at 15.8% owned. He's a number 2 owned quarterback. So, again, like you said, this is a unique week. You can handle some of that stuff. And you said stacking him with Diggs. John Brown's finally back and healthy.
Yes.
We'll get to the receivers later. Remind me let's talk about him and see what his salary is, etc. But good to see Josh Allen back doing well. Let's hope he does it again this week against Arizona.
Yeah, it was weird. It was like the first 3 weeks, people were giving them like MVP talks. It was, I don't know.
We're funny about how we do things. We see right in front of our nose. He plays well. He's the greatest player in the world, and he has a few games that he wins per se, but they don't get the points they want, and then they're trash. I remember
Yeah.
Wilson was playing that game earlier in the week. I apologize off the top of my head. I don't remember. They ended up losing at the very end. I think it was an overtime where he threw an interception. And he were talking MVP and all this stuff. And then he throws an interception in overtime, and they just started talking about what's wrong with this guy.
That's how it goes.
We're fickle.
That's how it goes. Yep. All right. So this play is really interesting. So there are some really big weather concerns in Cleveland. So definitely have to keep an eye on it. I think they said like 40-mile-per-hour winds, a bunch of rain. So if that's the case, I'm probably not going to go here as much. But Deshaun Watson's 6,100 versus Cleveland and a 46-point game total. That total has dropped a ton since the beginning of the week when it was like 51. The Texans are 3.5-point underdogs here. And Watson, he is averaging 24.5 DraftKings points per week. He's been playing very well as of late. After a slow start to the season. So I like the matchup here versus Cleveland. It was a really poor passing defense. I like the price here for Watson. You get a nice discount off the top guys. I love the stacking options, Fuller and Cooks. It's just the weather concerns are concerning me a little bit.
Yeah, he's only 3.2% owned, Deshaun Watson.
It's got to be the weather, huh?
It's got to be the weather. Let me go real quick and look. I should know this off the top of my head. Is that an early game or a late game?
I believe it's
Let's go.
It's an early game.
If I didn't have dyslexia, it's an early game. So
Yeah.
you're gonna be able to know, when you make your final choices if you want to change your lineups. Luckily, it's an early game, and that'll really help that. But usually we try not to worry about weather, but weather can definitely make a difference. So
Yeah.
But he is definitely low on 3.2%, Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, I mean, he's low on. It's just the weather is concerning because it does look bad. So
Wow.
just
Okay.
look out for that. All right, so the next play here, Jared Goff, 6,500 versus Seattle here in a 54.5-point game total, which is the second highest on the slate, where the Rams are a 1.5 favorite. And Goff is averaging 19.6 DraftKings points per week. You get a nice savings off of the top guys. He should be lower owned than the top guys as well. And you really can't ask for a better matchup here against Seattle. Seattle has given up the most DraftKings points to opposing quarterbacks. And Goff also has really good stackable options, Woods, Kupp, Reynolds, who we'll all talk about there. So I like the price. I really like the matchup. I love attacking the Seattle defense. This is probably the lowest I'll go personally in quarterback, but we'll talk about one more guy. But I like the price here.
Yeah, he's 11.79% owned, third highest owned quarterback, but it all makes sense because Seattle is just still having trouble, with the quarterback play or defending the quarterback play. And Goff is at home, and I don't have the stats on me, but my recollection is he just seems to play better at home. And I feel much more comfortable playing him in this matchup at home, or any matchup at home. But obviously against Seattle. What a great opportunity, and obviously people have got him. Goff is never very high on the ownership, and being at the third most owned quarterback definitely tells you that people are on this, and for good reasons.
Yep, probably the highest owned. We're going to see Goff all year, honestly.
Yes.
All right, so the last play I do want to touch on, and this is a kind of a punt quarterback play if you do need to go down there. This week, I really don't think you need to save at quarterback with all the value we're going to talk about, but if you do want to, Drew Lock, 5,500 versus the Raiders. Just a punt play here. Great matchup against the Raiders. He had a very good game last week, scoring 32 DraftKings points. He had a very bad first half, but he had a really good second half there. Tons of options to get the ball to. And he has been playing really well as of late. He had like 32 DraftKings points last week, 20 the week before. So he is starting to get it together, it looks like. Just a solid pump play option at 5,500. I'm personally probably not going to go here. I'd rather go up and spend up a quarterback. But if you're looking for a punt option, I think this is a decent one.
Well, he's 3.9% owned. That's pretty low. Here, let me
Yeah, it is.
I'm going to adjust my microphone just a tad. I think I'm a little low. And 3.9%. He's in Las Vegas. He did run. I was like 40, 45, 47 yards and got a touchdown. So he got like 10 points just on his legs. So I worry a little bit. He scored like 30 points or something. I'm not complaining, but you got to recognize that last week he did score rushing the ball, which I don't know if you're going to expect all the time. But he seems to be a pretty raw guy. I sense that this guy may be a decent quarterback here in the next year or two. He seems to have the attitude. The whole team seems to really have the attitude as we don't want to be losers anymore. We want to be winners. So I like the fact he's playing well at the end of the game. He doesn't give up. I mean, when you do as well as he does in the fourth quarter, I like that sign. He's scary to play, but it's worked out. I think I played him last week a couple times, and at the beginning of the game, I was going, "What was I thinking?" And of course, by the end of the game, I was going, "Well, that was a great decision." So,
yeah, me too, exactly, just like that.
He's scary to play, but it can pay off. But 5,500 is a good number, and 4% basically ownership.
Yep, I don't mind it. I don't mind it. All right. So, was there any quarterback you wanted to touch on, or do you want to move to the running backs?
No, I think I'm good. I don't think I have anybody else other than who you've already mentioned to talk about.
Okay, so getting into the running backs here, of course you can play Kamara any given week. The matchup's kind of tough this week, but I really like Aaron Jones, 7,100 versus Jacksonville, and this is probably where I'm going to go to in cash as well. You got a 51-point game total here, but the Packers are 13-point favorites, and I really like that for Jones, that they are that a big favorite there. And I love the matchup here against an awful Jacksonville run defense. I really don't get this price of 7,100. It just feels way too cheap to me. Reception upside, he got 5 passes his last game. He's good for 20 touches on any given week, and he has a ton of touchdown upside, 7 touchdowns in 6 games. And like I said, they should be ahead most of the game in theory, leading to more rushing attempts for Aaron Jones, and probably one of the best running back plays on the slate here.
Yeah, he's a second-owned running back, 29%. I think what's helped him this week, where he's playing against Jacksonville, but he's come back from an injury and he's played in a game. He played significantly. They kind of got ahead and they kind of pulled him out a little bit. So I think, the fantasy manager, the DFS manager, is probably feeling much more excited about. They know that this week he may even get more. Now the problem is they could get way ahead against Jacksonville and they could pull away from him. But definitely, he's a very popular guy. And like you said, 8,800. This guy can put up big games. And the fact that he is a receiver and a running back combination really makes his ceiling go up even more. So that's a fun play right there.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to touch on was I guess there's a lot of wind in Green Bay as well. So I don't think it's going to affect Jones per se, but it could affect the game a little bit.
Yeah, sounds good. Is that okay? That's another.
I think there's
really
like 40-mile-per-hour ones. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But I'm not overly worried about it.
Okay. I hate wind. Ugh.
Yeah, I do too, and the weather. So, all right. Getting into the next play here, James Robinson, 6,600 versus Green Bay, and a 51-point game total where the Jaguars are 13-point underdogs, which I don't mind for him. And he is averaging 19.6 DraftKings points. Great matchup here against this great Green Bay defense, especially the Green Bay run defense. The only thing that concerns me here is 0 receptions last week with the new quarterback change. But he did have 4 receptions the last 4 weeks prior. 4 weeks in a row, he had at least 4 receptions there. So should, in theory, receive some pass catching upside in a game that the Jaguars should be trailing. Solid game last week with 25 touches, and the Packers' run defense is awful. So I don't mind James Robinson at 6,600.
Yeah, 8.8% owned. He's the 6th most owned running back, which it's pretty high. It's pretty high for a Jacksonville Jaguar. Yeah. Obviously Minnesota destroyed Green Bay at running. I don't know if Jacksonville really has the talent, but they've been running the ball well, and like you said, he's been a dual threat. New quarterback is a concern here, but 8.8% owned is a little bit up there. I don't know if that's really that big of a deal, but excellent play here.
Yep, not bad. All right, so this play is really interesting. I'm curious to hear the ownership. Miles Sanders, 6,400 versus the Giants in a 44.5-point game total where the Eagles are 3.5-point favorites. And he is averaging 16.9 DraftKings points. I love the matchup here against the Giants. First game back since week 6 here. So he should see a decent amount of work, with a good matchup here. And this is the cheapest Sanders has been since week 2. So I think he is too cheap here. I think people are going to see that. And I like the matchup against the Giants.
12.3% owned. So he's definitely popular. Of course, he was a first-round back this year, had injury troubles. So I think people have always had their eye on him. So he's up there in ownership, 12.3%. Yeah, good opportunity. The Giants' defense is playing a little bit better, but I still think this is a situation where another dual threat running back, just like most of these guys in the top here, that can catch the ball and run the ball. So that should be a really good one for Sanders.
Yep, I don't mind it at all, especially at that price there.
6,400.
Yep. All right. Do you know if Kenyon Drake's going to play?
You know what? I don't know if that's official yet. I forgot to memorize all that. Maybe I'll go down and look.
The thing that sucks is it's a 4:00 game.
The last report that Bob Harris has on Football Diehards is he has a good chance to play.
Okay, well, I'll say that
it's listed as questionable for today's game. Dangle has a chance to play against the Bills, and that's all we know. And so you're going to be taking a risk.
Okay, well, if he does not play, I mean, it sucks. It's not till 4, but if he does not play, if there's some news comes out within the next couple hours, I think Edmonds is a really good play at 6,300. I'll say that.
Well, certainly follow Football Diehards and whatever products you guys follow. We may know something before the initial kickoff of the first games. However, a lot of times you won't know for sure, so you'll be taking a risk. Edmonds right now is at 5.8% owned, and just below him is Kenyon Drake at 5.6% owned. So that I guess I don't know what that's saying, but
I mean, I guess the thing is on DraftKings you are able to change your lineup after the 1:00 kickoff. You can't change the 1:00 guys, but you can change the guys in the 4:00 games.
Okay.
But yeah. If Drake does not play, I think Edmonds is going to be a really, really good play at probably low ownership, especially since it is a 4:00 game. So just something to think about.
Well, that's a great opportunity there. So if you really like that, you can. Well, the question is, you may want to play Edmonds, and if Drake comes back, you may not want to play Drake, but you'll have a lot of other players you can look at. So you may want to be prepared to either switch between those two or somebody else that's equally in the same time frame. Or I guess that's the end of that. That's a good point. I like that idea.
Yep, it's a high risk but really high reward there. So, all right, getting into the next play, we have Giovanni Bernard 5,400 versus Pittsburgh here in a 45.5-point game total, where the Steelers are 7.5-point favorites. So this is a really tough matchup here versus Pittsburgh, but Joe Mixon, I believe, is out. And Bernard had 22 and 24 DraftKings points in the last 2 weeks, getting 18 touches in both games. And, should be good for another 15 to 20 touch game here. And he does have some pass catching upside, catching 8 of 9 targets the last 2 weeks. Has 2 reception touchdowns as well the last 2 weeks. In this game, I just think at 5,400, not a bad price there. The matchup's tough, but he can get some pass catching upside. So I don't mind Bernard. What's his ownership? I'm curious to hear it there.
Yeah, Bernard's ownership is 1.5%, which surprises me because Mixon was ruled out yesterday. So there should have been a decent amount of time, for perhaps Bernard's ownership to go up a little bit. Of course, it's at Pittsburgh, and maybe that's the concern there. But $5,400 for Giovanni and 1.5% owned. And I would assume that may crawl up here in the next few hours on Sunday morning. Those are tempting numbers, aren't they?
Extremely, because he's going to be the number one guy. He's going to get 15 to 20 touches. I think people are just looking at the matchup, which it's understandable, but he's going to get a lot of opportunity here.
And like you said, he can catch the ball, so he's versatile enough. Yeah, that's a really interesting one. I'm going to have to seriously consider that.
Yeah,
I have not put my lineups in. My whopping 5 lineups at $1 each I have not put in yet today.
Well, something to think about there.
Yes.
All right, so this next play is interesting. DJ Dallas, 5,100 for going against the Rams here. Carson and Hyde, I believe, are out, giving Dallas another huge opportunity this week. He didn't get much going last week due to the Seahawks trailing a lot in that game. He was able to rack up 20 DraftKings points 2 games ago, though. He has scored in each game he started. A solid matchup here against the Rams. Should see a decent amount of volume if they are ahead. If they are not ahead, it does concern me. But it does have some touchdown upside in what should be a high-scoring game here. So DJ Dallas, really interesting. It's just if they get behind, I don't think they'll use him that much. But really hard to see the Rams getting out, too far ahead of the Seahawks here.
Yeah, well, the Rams, were they on a bye week? No, they weren't on a bye week last night. Dallas is 2.2% owned, which is very low. Has he been catching the ball much?
I don't think he has much. I think he has a couple receptions, but nothing crazy.
That's too bad because it would be nice to. I apologize, looking something up while I talk.
Very good.
No, well, he had two targets and 2 catches in week 9, but that's really not a big deal. So
yeah, 5 receptions in week 8. It's not bad.
That's not bad. So we're really worried about the game flow. We don't want Seattle to get way behind early in this game, is what you're saying.
Yep, which I don't think they will.
It's in LA. Yeah, those are things you have to think about when you're determining what you want to do with Dallas.
Yep. All right. So this next play, I'm assuming, is going to be one of the higher-owned plays on the slate, and for a good reason here. Duke Johnson, 5,000 versus Cleveland in a 46-point game total. The total has been dropping since the weather. So the Texans are 3.5-point underdogs, and David Johnson concussion is out, making Johnson the number 1 running back in Houston this Sunday here. So he did have 20 touches last week after David Johnson left with an injury. And you do get some reception upside with Duke Johnson here. He caught 4 passes last week. Really solid matchup here against Cleveland. I love the price here since David Johnson is out. 5,000 seems way too cheap for the amount of volume he's going to get.
13% owned, 4th owned running back this week in week 10. So everybody's seeing a high situation. They like this. He's a dual threat, like you said. This is a good opportunity. Now, is this another? And of course, it's a revenge because he used to play for Cleveland, and they're playing in Cleveland. So I don't know, revenge. I don't like the revenge narrative, but it is something to talk about. And again, isn't that the weather issue you're talking about that you're worried about in Cleveland?
Yep, there is a weather issue, but since he's a running back, the passes are going to be nice and short there. I don't think it's going to affect the running backs all that much.
Could actually help him. You could argue that it may help him, and the tight end also, Hooper, who's coming back, that we'll talk later about. Yep, that's a very good play. $5,000 and 13% owned. That's a pretty low number for a top 5 owned player.
Yep. All right, so getting into the next one, and this is insane here. Mike Davis, 4,000 going against Tampa Bay and a 50.5-point game total where the Panthers are 5.5-point underdogs. So McCaffrey is out, and Mike Davis is averaging 14.3 DraftKings points per week. The matchup is pretty tough here against Tampa Bay, who has one of the best run defenses in the league, but Davis has really elite pass-catching ability, 43 receptions on the year. And he had 8 receptions against Tampa Bay in a week. I think it was like week 2 or 3 there. So he can definitely do it in the air. You really don't need much at 4,000. I think just with the pass catching upside alone, he's going to hit value here. And DraftKings made a big mistake pricing Mike Davis down to 4,000. It does not make sense to me.
I think we can put Mike Davis in the all 2020 chalk team. 46% owned. That means 46% of the lineups, according to our estimated data, he's in.
Yep.
So can you fade this guy? What's your perception as opposed to cash versus GPP? Can you get away from this guy? Is that smart or not?
In cash, you 100% have to go here because in cash, he's going to be so high owned. In tournaments, if you do want to get different, I don't hate maybe, fading Mike Davis. It's really risky here, but maybe he has a really bad game. I definitely can see the reason for that. So if you do fade him and it is successful, you have a really big advantage on the field, but it's just really hard to. I mean, he's 4,000. He really doesn't need to do much at all to hit value here. So I'm going to have a lot myself. Maybe I'll have a couple lines without him, but overall, I think he's...
Well, remember, Tampa Bay, is good against the run. However, Davis played Tampa Bay in Week 2, and I don't remember. I think Christian McCoy. There's a memory. McCaffrey was still playing, and Davis did okay. He had 8 catches on eight targets in that game. So, if you're worried about Tampa Bay's strong rushing defense, they can pass to Davis like they did in Week 2. So that's a little bit of a warm fuzzy on that. I would be tempting to fade this guy in like maybe 10% or 20% of my lineups, but I'm not, I don't play that many lineups. I play 5 lineups. So, yeah, that's a heck of a chalker right there. It's going to be fun to watch this guy. But remember, what was it, about 4 weeks ago when Cook was down, Dalvin Cook was down in Minnesota, and Middleton came in, or whatever his name is? And everybody Madison. Everybody was absolutely sure this guy was going to rock. It was incredible. And I don't know what he got, 4 or 5 fantasy points. This may be this is a different guy in a different situation, but it's not always what we think. But that's a huge chalk at 46% and a huge opportunity at 4,000. So what an interesting situation. Can't wait to just watch and see how it turns out.
Yeah, I can't wait either. It's going to be fun. All right. So, was there any other running back you wanted to talk about?
Well, I don't know about Jacobs. Do you think there's any worth playing Josh Jacobs at home against Denver this week? 6,500. He's 8.7% owned.
Yeah, I mean, people really like this guy. I'm not too high on him. Earlier in the year, it looked like he would have some pass-catching upside, but as of late, he's getting only 1 reception in the last 2 weeks. I really don't like that in DFS. It seems like he's more touchdown dependent. He's dependent on that 100-yard game, and it looks like he has some ownership with him as well. So I'm not really going to go to Josh Jacobs. I'm not overly high on the guy, but I think he's talented, but just I don't like the pass-catching upside at that price.
I totally agree with you. It'd be fun to play him, but I think I would probably regret it.
Yeah.
So that's beautiful. That's all I really have, different than what you've already talked about.
All right, so we'll get into the wide receivers here. Up top, Devonte Adams, 9,000 versus Jacksonville in a 51-point game total, where the Packers are 13-point favorites. So we did touch on it a little bit. So the wind is a little concerning here. I heard 40-mile-per-hour winds, which could affect Devonte Adams, but even then, he's averaging an insane 29.6 DraftKings points. He scored 112 DraftKings points in the last 3 weeks. Gets an insane amount of volume, 39 targets in the last 3 weeks as well. I love the matchup here against an awful Jacksonville defense. Multiple touchdown upside, 8 touchdowns in 5 full games played. Just a really high floor and an insane ceiling for Adams. That's the only problem is that wind is just scaring me a little bit. But even then, I think he's going to have a good game.
Well, he's again the number 1 owned receiver. It's been that way for several weeks now since he's come back. 23% owned. That's still high, but maybe a little lower than it has been, and perhaps it's the weather. Jacksonville, I guess you could always, worry about the fact that if they get ahead, are they going to slow down a little to Adams? I don't really have a feel for that. And he's been such gold. Like you said, he's averaging well over 1 touchdown a game. He's hard to get away from this guy. Do you play this guy in GPP?
I definitely think you can, and I think it's really easy to with all the value we just talked about, Duke Johnson, Mike Davis. The ownership is a little high, and if the wind is going to be that bad, maybe have some lineups without him. I definitely will, but I think it's a good play at 9,000 for sure.
Well, Devonte Adams, he can go deep, he can go short. They get him all over the place. So if there is a wind concern, you can always rely on the fact that they'll probably move him around and get him into short yardage catches, and that they already are doing this season. So, yeah, that darn weather is sticking in the back of our mind on that one.
For sure, but you got to think about it though. So, I don't think it's going to affect him too much. But all right, so the next play here, Stephon Diggs, 7,500 versus Arizona. Highest point total on the slate here, and Diggs is averaging 19.4 DraftKings points per game. Great matchup here against the Arizona defense, and I'm really loving the Allen and Diggs stack this week. Also a great run back option if you are doing a Murray stack on the other side. And just tons of upside here and what is a potential shootout for Diggs. So 7,500, I like it a lot. You get a nice discount off of Devonte Adams up there. So, yep, I like it.
And Diggs is 16.7% owned. He's the fourth highest owned wide receiver. So definitely, he's been doing. It's just he continues. He's very consistent, beginning tons of work. So, that's a good. Now let me ask you a question. John Brown had been out for a while for Buffalo. Last week he had a really good game, and he was really getting back into flow. Seems like he's healthy. His salary is what, $5,300. So you're saving a significant amount of money on him if you decided to stack him instead of Diggs. And his ownership is 7.2%. Were you going to talk about him, or what do you think about that?
No, I like John Brown a lot at 5,300. It seems like he's been battling some injuries as of late, not doing so well, but it looks like he's healthy. Like watching him last week, like the dude looks good. He looks like he's back. So 11 targets last week, 8 receptions. I do think he's going to, do decent again this week. So the price is still low. Last week he was like 4,600. I wish he was around there this time, but I think 5,300 is still really cheap for John Brown.
Well, last week Diggs had 12 targets, 9 catches, 118 yards, blah, blah, blah. Brown had 11 targets and 8 catches. So he was right up there with Diggs. I'm not trying to say, those are just statistics. Obviously he's not the physical, intimidating guy like Diggs is, although he's fast. He's definitely fast.
Yes.
And they will go to him if he's healthy. So he's an interesting alternative to Diggs.
Yep, for sure. I like it. All right. So getting into the next play here, and Keenan Allen, 7,100 versus Miami, and a 48.5-point game total, where the Chargers are 2.5-point underdogs. So Allen is averaging 19.9 DraftKings points per week, and I'll say it every week, I still think he's underpriced, even here at 7,100. Just based off the volume he gets. The dude's averaging, so many targets a game, over 10.5 targets per game this year. And one of those games he did get injured early on, so that's a little skewed. So he should be averaging even more. And Miami has given up the 6th most DraftKings points to opposing wide receivers. Allen gets tons of volume. 86 targets on the year, which is insane there. Fantastic cash play week after week. I think I've played Allen in cash pretty much every single week, and it's worked out pretty much every single time. I think he's fine in cash here. Again, I like the matchup. I like the price. More so a cash play for me. I do think he has decent tournament upside, but I'd rather go up and get like a Diggs or something.
Well, Keenan Allen is 13.6% owned. He's the 5th most owned wide receiver, so he's fairly well owned this week. I think it's interesting, too, to think about Miami last week. You watch the game. They just dominated that game. They won 28-17. But a lot of it was special teams. And you look at Tui, he only had like 93 yards passing. The rushing was only like 130. They didn't do anything on offense. But they got ahead, and they didn't have to do a lot because of the defense. But given that fact, if Miami, still developing with Tua, that's the concern. You got a rookie in there. This is his like 3rd start. Is this guy not going to really? Are they not going to be able to maintain the ball? And there's going to be more time given to the Los Angeles Chargers offense, which is going to help Allen. That's my whole point. If there's not a lot of turnovers, well, if there's, obviously you don't want to turn the ball over, but. Miami is still a question as whether they can control the ball and control the time of the clock. And if they can't control the time of the clock, that gives the Chargers more time on offense.
Yep, definitely makes sense. Yep. All right. So this next play here, Christian Kirk, 5,700, going against Buffalo. And this is kind of the same thing here. Like DeAndre Hopkins is 7,700. You're getting a huge discount here for Christian Kirk, who's been playing really well. 56.5-point game total, which is the highest on the slate, where the Cardinals are 2.5-point favorites. Fantastic matchup here against Buffalo. And he's been doing really good as of late, scoring at least 10 DraftKings points in the last 5 games and scoring at least 20 DraftKings points in the last 3 games as well. Great cheap pairing option with a Kyler Murray. He does have 6 touchdowns on the year also, and it could be another opportunity to score here in a game that could be a potential shootout. So Christian Kirk, 5,700. I like the price. I like the stacking option with Murray.
Yeah, Christian Kirk, 9.7% owned. I'm trying to understand what's going on. Hopkins has gotten super targets most of the time. He's double-teamed most of the time, or he's up against the best defensive player. But he only had 3 targets last week, and he caught all 3 balls. You got Murray. Murray only ran 11 times, but he ran for 100 yards, or a little over 100 yards. So, and Christian Kirk was open. They're throwing to Kirk because he's open. Because but Hopkins always seems to get those targets even when he's open. So I'm not sure what to think about that. Should I ignore that? He's 9.7% owned. Kirk is. Hopkins is the number 2 owned receiver at 17%. So I think your typical DFS player is ignoring last week on Hopkins.
Yeah, they are. I mean, I'm not overly concerned about it, but I think I don't know. I like Hopkins this week as well, especially if I'm stacking with Murray. But I think Kirk, you get a huge discount off of him, and Kirk has actually outscored Hopkins the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, so something to think about there. All right, so the next play here, Brandon Cooks, 5,600 going against Cleveland. We talked about the weather a little bit, which dropped that total down to 46, where the Texans are 3.5-point underdogs. So he is averaging 13.6 DraftKings points per week, 3 touchdowns on the year, and he started off the season really slow, but he's been fantastic the last 4 games he's played. 39 targets the last 4 weeks for Cooks, and only 30 targets the last 4 weeks for Fuller. So he's getting more targets than Fuller there. And I think the price is off here. I love the matchup against this poor Cleveland passing defense, and I'm liking the Watson and Cook stack. But like I said, the weather is a little bit concerning. But 5,600 is still a really cheap price there for Cooks.
5.9% owned, so his ownership is fairly low for Cooks.
Yep.
So we got a lot of players in this game that we're worrying about the weather. I'm going to have to think about that in the next couple of hours.
It is something to think about. It's a tough one.
Now, the other guy we forgot to talk about was Chubb. I apologize. In that game, Chubb is coming back. He's been gone since week 4. He got hurt against Dallas. Week 2 and 3, he scored into the 20s. He scored 23 and 25 fantasy points in week 2 and 3 of this season. Hadn't played for a long time. If this is a weather game, which it is, and Cleveland can kind of get up or not be too far down, is there a concern that they may run the ball and Chubb may get a lot of activity, which may hurt the receivers for Cleveland? What do you think?
Yeah, I do think that for sure. I mean, since Chubb's coming back, it's going to be interesting to see how they use him, like if they're going to use him a ton, because if they do, he has some serious upside. Do you know the ownership of Chubb here? Because if he's low owned, I mean, I think he might be worth a shot, but the only problem is he's going to be splitting touches. He's going to be splitting touches with Kareem Hunt, and the injury concern coming back off an injury, how much he's going to play, I think that's going to have him, at a really low ownership.
4.8% owned. He's fairly low owned. I don't know if that's going to change much in the next few hours because it's been known for a couple of days he came off IR and he's going to play. I think it was maybe Friday. So yeah. I'm not sure if that's going to move that much. I just think perhaps Chuck may be helped by bad weather because he's not a pass catching back, and if they get a little bit ahead or if it's a close game, I realize it's a split backfield. It's a frustrating thing, but he did score well before he got hurt. So it's something to think about him. He's a very tempting guy that may be independent of the weather, or maybe actually being helped by bad weather. And I forgot to mention him at running back, but glad we caught back up with him.
Yeah, especially with the low ownership, and if he does have a good game, we're not going to see him at 4% ownership next week for sure.
Yeah, maybe this is the Christian McCaffrey scenario from Week 9, although the talent's a little different and the weather is different.
It could be. It could be. All right. So the next play here, Deontay Johnson, 5,200 versus Cincinnati. We talk about this guy pretty much every week because when he's healthy, he is extremely good. The problem is he cannot stay healthy. In the 4 full games he's played, he has 48 targets in 4 games. Solid matchup here against Cincinnati, and a really good upside. A great tournament play. I love the price. He's cheaper than a Claypool or a Juju Smith. So yeah, Johnson at 5,200. If he stays healthy throughout the whole game, I do think he's going to do really good here. It's just can he stay healthy is what you got to worry about.
Yep, it's just the absolute way it's been going with this guy. He's really almost their number one target. Juju had the big game last week. He is owned at 6.5%. He meaning Deontay Johnson, and actually. Chase Claypool is 5.8, a little below him, and Juju is at 4.2. So, despite the big game by Juju last week, the ownership for Deontay Johnson is higher, and of course he's got a lower price. He's got a $900 less price than Juju.
Yeah, definitely.
He actually is lower. Chase Claypool is 5,800. Deontay Johnson is the lowest salaried Pittsburgh Steeler of their top 3 receivers.
Which is a little interesting there. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it's the injury issue. But, if Deontay's playing well and he's out there and Juju's out there, Chase is just third string. He's not going he has not shown he's going to have a big game if those first 2 guys are healthy and playing.
Yep, I agree. 100%. All right. So, getting to the next play here, I'm curious to hear the ownership on this guy. We have Devonte Parker, 5,000 versus the Chargers, and Preston Williams is out, giving Parker more opportunities here. Not a bad matchup against the Chargers. Parker had a really good start to the season with Fitzmagic. After that, kind of slowed down a little bit, but 7 targets last week, 6 receptions, 12.4 DraftKings points. The new quarterback Tua. A little bit of a concern, but I think Tua is starting to finally get into it a little bit. He's looking a little bit better as the games go on, so I think he'll be fine here. And Parker's really cheap here at 5,000. I'm assuming he's going to get a ton of targets, being the number 1 option on the Dolphins here. So the ownership, I'm curious to hear if it's really low. It might intrigue me a little bit more, but I'm kind of liking this play here.
Yeah, his ownership is 9.2%. He's up there a little bit. Yeah, he's a curious one. I liked Tua had a really nice game 2 weeks ago, but he's still a rookie. I worry a little bit, but definitely, the percentage of targets has gone way up. It's narrowed down with Preston Williams out now. Tua seemed to like Preston Williams. I'm not really sure why he was favoring him, but he was. So that's an interesting situation. 9.2%, $5,000. Hey, did you want to talk about Jakeem Grant now, or you want to wait?
No, we can talk about him now. Grant is probably, I'm throwing Grant in my cash lineup. He is 3,000. The minimum price wide receiver, which I don't know what DraftKings is doing here. So since Preston Williams is going to be out, Grant's going to go right into that Preston Williams role here. And at 3,000, really you don't need much, but I still think he can have a really good game here. I think he's going to get a decent amount of targets. You don't need much. So give me Jakeem Grant there at 3,000, going to plug him in at cash. I think you could play him in tournaments as well, as long as the ownership's not too crazy, but I like Grant a lot.
Well, right now Grant's 4.9%. Is that low enough for GPP for you?
That's low enough for me for sure. I was expecting a little bit more because he's 3,000. So yeah, not bad.
Yeah, there's still a few hours left for shopping, but that's a pretty low percentage. Well, he's a very fast, very small receiver. So I guess people are probably still worrying: can this guy really, put up a big game? What's this guy's ceiling? Like you said, at $3,000, he only has to score about 10 fantasy points for you to kind of be happy, accepting in that situation.
Yep, 10 would be fantastic at 3,000.
Let's see. He had five targets for 4 catches, 35 yards last week, with the understanding that Parker was in the game and then got hurt somewhere in the middle of the game. I don't remember. So, you know, that's he's an intriguing player this week.
Yep. All right, so the last thing I do want to touch on is the Rams wide receivers. I think are very interesting. Cooper Kupp, 6,900. Robert Woods, 6,600, and Josh Reynolds, 3,500. So Seattle has given up the most DraftKings points to opposing wide receivers. I think the Rams stack will go very overlooked here. I think it'll be under owned, and I'm really liking the Goff and the Kupp's probably the guy I want to go to here at 6,900. You really can't ask for a better matchup here against Seattle. And curious to hear the ownership of Cooper Kupp. And I think Josh Reynolds, 3,500 for the Rams, is a really good punt play as well. He's been getting some decent targets. I like the price, but Kupp's probably the guy I'm going to go to.
We had a monster week last week, and he had like 10 catches for 100 yards. And so he had 20-plus points without even scoring a touchdown. The three main receivers for the Rams are in our top 8 of ownership.
Wow.
Kupp is the third most owned at 17%. Then you've got Josh Reynolds just above Woods at 11.9%, and then Woods just below him at 11.6%. So definitely we got a chalky wide receiver core for the Rams. Everybody is expecting big things from Seattle, and it's a bit chalky, I guess I would say. But big opportunity this week for the Rams.
Yep, it's. You really can't ask for a better matchup here, especially at home versus Seattle. Like, it is the prime spot to succeed here. Cooper Kupp had 20 targets last week.
I can't believe that. He only caught like 50% of them. What's wrong with that guy?
I don't know.
That's a ton of targets. That's just a ton of targets.
Yeah. So.
Now, they were behind in that game, so maybe that made a difference. But yeah, that's a lot of targets.
Yeah. Was there any other wide receiver you want to touch on?
Well, interestingly, Michael Thomas missed how many games has he missed? And he came back, he played last week, but that it wasn't there yet. The magic wasn't there yet. And remember, this guy was the number one receiver last year. He was getting targets like mad. He was way up there, and his salary right now is what, $7,400? He's had a week to kind of get into the game and get the flow. Maybe he's 11% owned. He's 11.5% owned. Maybe this guy's worth a certain percentage of your DFS lineups. As maybe this is the week he comes back and becomes 90% of what he was last year, and score 20+ points or whatever. Is 7,400 too high of us to do this yet?
No, not at all. Like, 7,400 is really cheap for Michael Thomas. So in week 1, they opened up at 9,000 salary, and for a good reason. Like, last year, Michael Thomas was the dude you wanted to play just about every single week in your cash games. He was the Devonte Adams of this year. So Michael Thomas, I think that ownership is actually not bad for him, because last year we'd see him double or triple that at times. So yeah, 7,400. He came back last week, 6 targets, 5 receptions, kind of getting into things. And the Saints had a really bad game last week, a really uncharacteristic game where they scored 3 points. That's not going to happen here again, especially against San Francisco. So, Thomas is very, very intriguing to me.
Okay, that's you hit a lot of the ones that I had already hit on mine. That was kind of the intriguing. Rieger's another kind of quirky, real long shot guy. He's at 4.3% owned. Well, that's actually a little higher than I expected against the Giants. And Jalen, it's Rager. I probably pronounced it wrong. I apologize. 4,200. You interested in all at this character?
Yeah, a little bit. Do you know if Deshaun Jackson's coming back this week?
No, he is out. I think. I don't know if it's official, but no, he's not coming back. Now, Alshon Jeffrey has got a chance to play. But they've been saying that a lot, and even if they play him, they say they have a special purpose for him. What that is, I'm not sure. I don't think I would let that scare me right now. It's been such a long time that he's played. I don't think I would worry about that.
Yeah, I definitely like Rieger at 4,200. I definitely get it. The matchups there has been playing very well when he does play. So yeah, 4,200. It does seem really cheap, doesn't it?
Probably a GPP play, obviously. We don't really know. Again, a lot of things are changing, but Wentz is playing better. You're playing in New York against the Giants. The Giants have had a half-decent defense, but it's mainly because of turnovers. I don't know if they're, I don't know if they're really going to. Do you have any over and under in that game? I apologize asking you off the top of your head.
Yeah, I think it's like 45.
45. Okay, so anyway, thought I'd bring him up.
All right. Yep, not bad play. All right, so we'll move into the tight ends now. And up top, I typically pay down at tight end, and it works out a ton of times. But like I said, with so much value on the slate, you're able to go up and get pretty much anybody you want. So Darren Waller at 5,900 is very interesting, averaging 14.4 DraftKings points. What I like about Waller is he gets a ton of targets, 10 targets in Week 9, 6 in Week 8, 9 in Week 7. Just the volume he gets is fantastic. 4 touchdowns on the year, 394 yards, 50 receptions. I think there's a lot of upside with this play. I do know he's probably going to be the highest owned tight end, but you are able to go up and get a lot of players this week, and Darren Waller is somebody I'm going to be paying up for a decent amount.
Yeah, Waller was just a monster at the beginning of the year. He's kind of slowed down if you just look at, even though he's getting the targets, he's only in Week 7 he got 50 yards. Week 8 he got 27 yards. In Week 9 he got 22 yards. He scored a touchdown, not a touchdown, touchdown. Yeah, I love the guy. I just wish, I guess I want him to be a bigger monster than that. And at tight end, I guess I'm being kind of foolish. But, you look at guys like Kelsey and who can have huge games, huge games. And I don't know if Waller's ceiling is that big, but 5,900, and he's a second-owned tight end this week at 13.4%. I don't mean to be throwing cold water on Waller. Obviously, he's got the opportunity each week to have big games. It just seems like he's getting some catches, he's getting the targets, and they're just not. It's not doing what I personally my personal preference is. I'd like him to do a little bit better, but definitely, obviously, he's a great talent and a great situation, and they're home against Denver, so maybe that'll even help that.
Yeah, not bad. So, all right, next play we got Evan Ingram, 4,500 versus Philadelphia. And Ingram is averaging 9.3 DraftKings points. I wish he was averaging 19 DraftKings points, but Philadelphia has given up the most DraftKings points to opposing tight ends, so really good matchup here. 64 targets on the year for Ingram. The only problem is he only has 36 receptions, so and on a decent price here at 4,500, had his first receiving touchdown last week. He had a rushing touchdown earlier in the year. And I love the matchup here for Ingram. I love the volume he gets. Hopefully he can get it to the end zone. And I'm assuming he's going to be decently low owned, but do you know the ownership there?
7.4%. He's the 5th most owned tight end. So I'm sure he's moved up from last week. The last 3 weeks he's had 9 targets in Week 7, 10 in Week 8, and 10 in Week 9. And like you said, he finally got a touchdown, or passing touchdown, or receiving touchdown. So he's been just into the 10, 12, 15 fantasy points for PPR fantasy points. So I think he's becoming, people are, I think, and of course with the correlation you just mentioned with Philadelphia and their problem with defending tight ends, he's a pretty darn good play, and I guess his ownership is up a little bit at 7.3%. He's a scary guy because he's failed us so many times. But
so many.
3 weeks in a row of pretty solid performances, I think, should be very important for our analysis, and I think he's a good play also.
Yep. So I do want to throw out one more play here. And Austin Hooper, 3,900 versus Houston. So the Browns are 4-point favorites here in a 46-point game total. Just a good matchup versus the poor Houston defense. Has been really solid when healthy, especially for his price here at 3,900. At least 5 targets in his last 3 games played. Just a nice punt tight end option here for Hooper.
5.5% owned, coming back from injury. He's the 6th most owned tight end, but 5.5 is a pretty good knockdown. Harrison Bryant played really well in Hooper's absence. I don't think that's going to cause a big problem right now. Harrison Bryant's still a young talent, so I don't think that's going to hurt Hooper's targets today. Just the weather. perhaps may be a problem. And of course, tight ends are the kind of player you want in weather. Like the short pass, like we're talking, coming out of the backfield, catches by other players. Tight ends can be that, obviously, in that same role. So 5.2% owned, that's pretty low.
Yeah, it is. Do you know who the highest owned tight end is?
Dallas Goedert, 15.5%, just above Darren Waller. He's a 4,200. He's a 4,200 salary. That probably helps.
Yeah. That's crazy. So yeah, Goddard's fine. I think he's fine at 4,200. Yeah, highest owned for sure. I mean, he's a really good play.
Yeah, we've been waiting for him to have a big game with Ertz being out.
Yeah, the problem is he hasn't really got anything going, but I think the upside's there.
Yeah, let me go. Have we looked at his box score? Well, let's just, I don't know how to spell his name.
It's ugly. It's ugly.
Is it really?
Yeah, 2.5 DraftKings points in Week 8, Week 3, 1.7, Week 2, 7. He did have a really good game in Week 1, though. So
that's a long time ago.
Yeah, it is.
Let me go look real quick at one quick thing. Well, yeah. Not much in Week 8, a bye in Week 9. He had only one target. I mean, for a guy who has got one target in the previous game against the Dallas Cowboys, that's a big risk to be the number one owned tight end this week. I'm a little perplexed. I don't think my coffee's working. That one makes no sense to me. I'll have to look at that a little more.
Yeah, it's definitely. I could see why. I guess. I mean, the upside's there. It's just he hasn't looked fantastic since Week 1, which you said is a long time ago. So I don't know.
Yeah, that
weird.
The ownership's pretty high for that. For cash, I don't know. I'd probably fade that personally, because perhaps there's some other options here. What do you think about Noah Fant? I mean, he's frustrating as heck. He had that big long catch in the beginning of the game last week, and you're going, oh yeah, and then he's running to the sideline limping away, and he pretty much did nothing else.
No, I'm a big fan of Fant. I had him last week. He was in my best lineup. If he wouldn't have got injured, I would have won I'd be in the Bahamas right now. But
he wouldn't be talking to you right now. I'd be talking to myself.
But yeah, Fant is fine. 3 targets, 3 receptions last week, but he did get hurt, which was frustrating. But the dude's really good. The dude gets a ton of targets. I like him in that offense. I think he has a good connection with Locke. So at 4,900, do you know the ownership for him? I'm assuming it's going to be
he's number 4 at 7.7. Noah Fant.
Not awful.
7% on. It's getting down there a little bit. He's just above Ingram, who was at 7.4.
Yeah, the matchup's really good. Not a bad play there.
He's intriguing. I just like the guy. And they're starting to develop the receivers. Judy had a huge game last week. Who's another interesting player that we didn't mention earlier, wide receiver. He really had a big game. The other receiver, the rookie. Come on, Emil. I forgot his name. Just let me go real quick. I apologize.
They got Tim Patrick there.
Yeah, Tim Patrick, who had a nice game last week. He's at 2.7 this week. The guy I'm thinking of is Halmer. KJ Halmer. Yeah. He's at 1.4%. He's 3,800. He had a pretty good game. I think they're playing him in the slot a little more last week. And he had just a little bit better game than Tim Patrick, but Patrick caught the touchdown. So, I don't know. I'm not saying to play Halmer, but he's an interesting guy in GPP because of the extremely low 1.4% ownership. But I don't know if those things are. Maybe that was because Noah Fant was hurt and didn't play that much. So you got to consider that in those analyses. So I'm not really saying. I'm just telling about these guys that they've come up a little bit. I like Judy. Yeah. I really like his talent. He's great. I didn't realize how talented that guy was or is. I'm not sure how to play him this week or in the next few weeks. He's at $5,600 this week at 7.6% owned. He's fairly high up there in owned. But anyway, those are interesting guys to keep a watch on and perhaps start playing.
I like it. All right, so we'll touch on defense a little bit. So I'm not going up and playing Steelers at 4,400. I mean, I think you can if you want to, but I really like the Saints here at home against the 49ers, who are missing a ton of players. The Saints defense did really well last week, scoring 16 DraftKings points there. So, yeah, I think the Saints are good. Yeah, 3,000 not a bad price there.
And they're the number one owned defense this week in DFS at 22% ownership.
As they should be. I think that's probably
as they should be.
Yeah. That's probably I'm going to play a ton of lineups with the Saints defense. Other than that, I guess you can look at the Lions defense. I know the Lions defense is really bad, but going against Washington at 2,600 is not a bad punt option. Other than that, there's not really anything I like.
Well, it's difficult to have a very good punt option when the Saints are playing San Francisco at $3,000 salary. Detroit's $2,600, so you're saving $4,000, and the ownership is only 6%. So, GPP wise, you're trying to look for a lower ownership. That would be one of them. Yeah. That's an interesting one.
Yep. So that's about it for defense there for me. Probably just the Saints and move on, really.
Okay. Yeah, I don't really have anything else. Detroit is an interesting idea because you got Alex Smith, who scares the heck out of me out there playing with that leg of his. How he almost lost his leg or lost his life or whatever, and he's out there. He's the starter now. He's gotten some reps this week. He looked pretty bad last week, but he was in a bad situation without practice. But he could throw some picks this week. And Detroit, given the low ownership at 6%, could be a very, very intriguing way to go, as you pointed out.
Yep, don't mind that at all.
Beautiful. That's about all I've got. All my little quirky picks here. I think we've gone through them all.
I like it. Hopefully, it's a good day here for us.
Yeah, great analysis. Congrats last week. I hope our listeners listened to you because maybe they made a lot of money too. I think I actually played last week. I think I won 3 out of 4.
Nice.
I lost one, so I did pretty good. But I'm again playing 50-50. I'm not playing GPP. I'm playing 50-50.
Nothing wrong with that.
Any other things you'd like to bring up?
Nope. Just check the weather concerns. If you want to take a shot on that Edmonds play, I think it could be a decent option, a high risk, high reward play, but it's going to be very low owned. It could be a slate breaker, but you got to keep in mind that it is at 4 o'clock. But the thing on DraftKings is you are able to switch out your lineups last second for the 4 o'clock game. So that's something I'm going to be looking at. Other than that, we talked about a lot of good plays. We talked about ownership, and hopefully it's another good week this week.
Fantastic. Well, good luck, and good luck, everybody, all of our customers. Let's have a great week, and enjoy the fact there's 5 games in the early games and 6 games in the late games, so you can sit back, as I do on Red Zone, and just soak up every dang play.
Sounds good.
All right. Talk to you next Wednesday.